Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger, and back on the show today, I'm so excited because we basically have an entire hour or so. If you download the podcast, you're going to get the full unedited interview, but Colin Worth from This Does Not Compute on YouTube, go check out his channel. Colin, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
Well, that's assuming anyone can stand a full hour of me, but, you know.
So, you know what? Why you used to do podcasts on your YouTube channel? Where did you kind of land on doing podcasts?
Oh man,
forward?
Yeah, I had a feeling this would come up.
I didn't think about it. It's just off the cuff.
It's fair because
okay.
you're definitely not the only person to ask me. Yeah, I did podcasts for a couple years, a little over 2 years. Long story short, and I don't want to be that guy who gets into the shameless plugs right away, but I literally just a couple of days ago uploaded a new quasi podcast thing specifically for my Patreon supporters.
Awesome.
Explaining for an hour. They have to deal with me for an hour.
They're paying for it.
Yeah, well, they are. So kind of what happened and where my head is. And long story short, I realized that the podcast was starting to consume more time than my regular YouTube content did. Mm-hmm. And I also had a fairly aggressive schedule with it. I was doing a podcast episode every week. And because of that, I scaled back to doing YouTube episodes every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like I was becoming a bit of a slave to it, where I stand by all the work that I produce, but let's just say there were some episodes where you can tell I was a lot more engaged in the content than others.
Okay.
And I realized I had enough stuff going on the back burner for the full edited, high quality YouTube production stuff than I wanted to see end up on the back burner. So I put the whole thing on hold so I could really focus on the video stuff.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Basically, and I haven't publicly announced this to my YouTube audience yet. I'm sure a few of them are going to trickle over here, and I'm sure you definitely have some shared viewers and listeners with my channel.
Absolutely.
Where I'm thinking of going is everything is going to go up on Patreon only, at least for a while, simply because it's so much easier for distribution and I don't have to worry about ads or anything like that.
Yeah.
I realize that podcasts, at least the way I do them, need to be audio only. Mm-hmm. And that's going to ultimately help with the whole amount of production time involved and amount of editing and all of that. So that's going to be kind of one rule, is they're only going to be audio going forward. The other rule is I'm not going to stick to a schedule. When I have a topic that is worthy of being covered, then I'll do it. I'm not going to force myself to, well, let's look at the tech news of the week kind of stuff. I did a few of those episodes and I never felt good doing them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where it is. The podcasts are semi back. We'll see where it goes from there. Okay. But I'm getting back into it. I did miss it. The entire time I did miss it.
Yeah.
It just kind of came down to figuring out what the priorities were and ways to make it fit, not only from a time perspective, but also a creative one.
Yeah. So what I've done recently, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I've gone to 5 podcasts per week, and that includes the broadcast that, also gets podcasted. Mm-hmm. And which is fine for me, because my mentality was, and as I'm sure you are well aware, it's constantly, we tweak our content creation like somebody tweaks a schematic circuit. Like, you find what works best, what's most efficient, what produces the best kind of content out the other end. And for me, what I've noticed doing 5 podcasts a week, which is really 4 dedicated podcasts, and then the broadcast, is my mentality was there's so much breaking news that it allows me to kind of hit not the buzzwords, but hit the trending topics in a more punctual manner, like while people are searching for it. But that was my original intention, and to some degree I am doing that. But what I wind up doing is just basically venting for 30 minutes a day, like oh, I'm going to talk about CRT. Okay, for instance, like last night I recorded a podcast, and I had full intentions, and you and I will talk about this, but I just bought a CRT monitor. I went to a electronics recycler and got a CRT, and I was going to do a podcast on, the pros and cons of CRT. Am I crazy for getting a CRT, tube monitor here in 2019? What's the mentality behind it? But I didn't cover any of that. I was just talking about it was a very therapeutic episode. I just kind of talked about where I was at, and, because it's important to me to kind of connect with my listeners in that way. But so I told myself I'm going to do a podcast every day because it'll allow me to hit what's trending every day, if something is trending every day, which it's kind of been slow the past couple weeks. I'm sure you've noticed not much is.
Well, yeah, we're in
nothing huge.
That time of year when all of the new products that companies were going to announce, we're kind of at the tail end of that, right? Because they're not going to announce anything between now and the holidays because it doesn't give enough time for people to buy it.
Right, need some lead time. I will say, and let's touch on this on the way out of this segment here. AirPods, the AirPod 2s. I'll preface.
What an AirPods Pro.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever they call it. It's got a weird, because of the way words in English get pluralized, I keep thinking it's a funny name, but then I realize, no, that's actually grammatically correct. AirPods Pro.
That actually works. So the biggest complaint, as usual, and the AirPod Pros being released, to me, signified a more psychological issue than any sort of debate over the worthiness of the product itself. The knee-jerk reaction has been their price. They're $250, and the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, it's Apple. That means they're really expensive. And I kind of want to get your take on this. My take on it is that $250 for a really, really good pair of noise-canceling headphones. Believe me, I am all about, giving Apple credit where credit's due, criticizing Apple where I see credit or criticizing is worthy, but I don't think the price of the AirPod Pros, this is so tongue twisting.
AirPods Pro, I know.
AirPods Pro, I don't think the price criticism is justified because by all accounts, they sound really good and they perform really well. And if you look around to any competition, $250 for a really good set of noise-canceling earphones, that's actually kind of towards the lower end. So do you have any kind of input on the AirPods Pro criticism or got any thoughts on that?
I guess I got 2 things on that one. First, real quick. So, there's people who just wear them all the time, right?
Yeah.
You see them just walking around with at least one of them in.
Something about Mary.
How the people who got on the Google Glass bandwagon at the beginning, remember those? The kind of augmented, the Google glasses that you wore?
Yeah.
People would call those people glass holes. Is there a term like that for the AirPod people? I'm just wondering. I haven't heard one. I think we need to come up with it.
Oh, you know what's going to happen is it's going to pop into one of our heads, like in the middle of some other segment. I thought of it, pod.
As long as whoever comes up with it gets appropriate credit. That's all I care about.
All right.
So that was that. So are they a good deal? I don't know. I've never listened to them, honestly. It's not a secret that I like Apple products. Mm-hmm. I'm not a crazy fanboy of everything, though. Like, there are some Apple fanboys who just buy everything. Like, they literally buy everything.
Absolutely.
I'm a bit pickier than that. There are some Apple products that I absolutely love and really like, and there are others that just don't make sense for me. And the AirPods so far have been one of them. I would say, Apple owns Beats, and there's no love lost between me and Beats. I just don't think they sound very good for the money. And fun fact, even people at the Apple store, like workers there, will criticize Beats for how much of a ripoff they are.
Yeah. Didn't Beats, weren't they caught with weights being put in the headphones to make them feel heavier?
Like all sorts of stuff. There was also some really crazy stuff between them and Monster. Because remember, Monster Cable originally owned them, and there was some legal crap going on there, and like some real sketchy, I don't know. Anyway, I think AirPods in general, both the original ones and these AirPods Pro, it's kind of like you're paying for the convenience. Yeah. I don't disagree that there's some serious technology in there. And maybe the sound quality isn't the best on any of them. And maybe on the new ones, the noise canceling isn't the best. But they are some of the smallest, most convenient, and like smoothest user experience earbuds that you can buy.
Yeah.
And I think, you're right. There are plenty of other earbuds out there that go for around that same price, maybe a little more, that probably sound better, probably work better. I know Sony makes a pair of true in-ear wireless earbuds, kind of like the AirPods. They're a little bit bulkier. They have a little bit shorter battery life. Obviously, they're not going to be nearly as quick and painless to pair to a device as AirPods are, because AirPods literally just pair. Like they just detect, like they know your phone's there, and hey, I'm done and I'm working now.
Oh yeah.
And the Sonys are, I'd like to say they're similar price, if not a little more expensive. They do sound better by all reports, and the noise canceling works better, but are they as attractive to the average consumer? No, I don't think so. I mean, AirPods are just, they're easy, they're slick looking, they're popular. Don't, discount the fact that people just want to buy popular stuff. Right. And you know what? For the money, if you take the entire package into account, it's probably a decent deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So a video I made recently, this goes to credit Apple's, user experience and their ecosystem that create. One of my most popular videos I've ever done was about the Samsung Galaxy Tab S6. And I titled the video, Things to Consider Before Buying, the Samsung Galaxy Tab S6. And all it was, and it's just funny that you can, if you mention Apple anywhere, like I said, for instance, okay, let's say you own an iPhone. Let's say you have all sorts of other devices in the Apple. You have a MacBook Pro, you have a Mac, whatever. You're in the Mac ecosystem. I say you might want to consider that it might make more of a positive impact on your lifestyle to go with an iPad Pro, even though it's more expensive. If you keep all your devices in the ecosystem, if it's one thing Mac has, it's that seamless integration of its ecosystem. So the mere fact that I said, hey, if you're already in the Mac ecosystem, you should consider the iPad Pro over the Galaxy Tab S6. That, of course, gets you lit up. Oh, you're this Apple fanboy over there. How much Apple paying you? It's like, dude, I'm not telling you to buy it. Spend your money on whatever you want. I'm just saying the Samsung is not going to integrate that well into your Mac ecosystem if that's the only Android device you have. If that's the only Samsung device you have. Like if you're going to be spending a lot of money anyways, you might as well stay in the Apple ecosystem, because that's a credit that I do concede to Apple, absolutely. I have an iPad and I love my iPad, is that if you stay within the ecosystem and you're happy with that and that's all you know, and you don't want to go through the learning curve of going to Android or something like that, there are few companies that have a more cohesive ecosystem than Apple. That's kind of what they've built their modern brand on. And that's why, that's a big roundabout way to say, I also have no beef with the Apple AirPods Pro.
There you go.
It's not, if they sound good.
The one thing I have a beef with is Apple's naming these days.
Oh, yeah.
Why does everything have to have pro in the name?
Exactly.
I've got this philosophy. If you have to put the word pro in the name of your product, it is not a professional product.
The up until recently, up until only a couple months, the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch MacBook Pro was dual core, hyper-threaded dual core. And I'm just like, why? So this doesn't seem like it needs a pro in the name if it's dual core.
It's just the fact that it's a mainstream product.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to go to Best Buy and buy a professional product. You know what I mean?
True. So the nomenclature is a little bit wacky, but you know what? Apple's a $1 trillion company, so
yeah, they can do whatever they want. They own planet Earth.
Call it whatever. I don't think they're sweating too much.
Yeah.
Of course, they sweat over marketing, but it's obvious. Whatever they're doing is literally paid off. I think we're going to wrap up this segment right there, and we'll come back. And I do want to talk about CRTs, Colin. Do you want to talk about CRTs when we get back?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And some old tech, wherever CRTs go from there.
Yeah, I got a few of those.
Cool. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I'm talking with Colin from the YouTube channel This Does Not Compute. If you change the channel and forget that we're on the radio, remember This Does Not Compute and go subscribe to his channel there on YouTube. It is an awesome channel. But more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Now, look at them yo-yos. That's the way you do it. Play the guitar and TV. That ain't working. That's the way you do it. Money for nothing and chicks for free. Now that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Let me tell you, those guys ain't dumb. Maybe get a blister on your little finger. Maybe get a blister on your thumb. We gotta install microwave ovens, custom kitchen delivery. Yes, we gotta move these refrigerators. Gotta move these color TVs.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. If you're just joining us, I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. My guest today is Colin Worth of the YouTube channel This Does Not Compute. Colin, how are you doing this evening? Just to re-up here.
Oh, I'm doing great, Johnny.
I hope you're doing better than when we first started, because I love having you on the show because we can just geek out about so many great things, which works well for a show called Geek Therapy Radio. So hopefully you got your geek juices going a little bit here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So speaking of geek juices, get your geek cathode ray tube ready because we're going to talk about some CRT monitors. Colin, here's a blanket question. How many CRTs do you think you have around your house? Please say a lot, because I want you to have a lot so my wife doesn't think I'm crazy for having one.
Well, okay, so I'm going to give you a number, and I'm looking around to actually count up the number because I forgot. But there's going to be a little asterisk attached to the end of that number. Okay. So I've got 5.
That's okay.
The little asterisk is they're all built into computers.
Built into computer, like they're all in ones?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So if you were expecting like, oh yeah, I've got like a wall full of PVMs or whatever. Yeah. I wish. So do you have like a Commodore PET laying around? What? All right. So let's go through the list.
Yeah, let's go.
So if anyone's watched my channel, I think you know what my home office looks like. I've got a Mac SE30, which I just finished not too long ago, getting up and running. Yep. I've got a Mac Color Classic, which is probably my favorite computer ever. Hidden in storage, I have a Mac LC575. I have an early iMac.
I'm noticing a trend.
The teeny little, all right, so this one's not really attached to a computer, but it's kind of only usable with one computer. I've got this teeny little 9-inch green screen CRT monitor that went with my Apple IIc.
No! I was crossing my fingers and I was about to take some bets on the over-under whether the last one would still be an Apple. And
well, it is.
It is.
It is. It's just not a. It's not a Mac.
No. Well, no. Yeah, that's true.
So
it's got Oregon Trail though,
and number munchers,
and number munchers, and word munchers.
Carmen San Diego.
Goodness. Oh, I'm just getting a wave of
Print Shop
Deluxe.
What the heck?
Yes.
What else did I play? I don't remember.
Man. Okay. Oh, was Math Blaster on there?
Math Blaster.
Or was that Windows?
I don't know. That might have been
DOS,
after.
sorry.
I don't know. My math thing was number munchers.
Yeah. The Troglodytes.
Yeah.
Their jaw moved crazy.
I remember growing up in elementary school, like kids these days, they're just given like iPads and laptops and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a computer classroom, one classroom that had computers in it for the entire school.
Right.
And we had computer class one day a week for like an hour. And they had, this lab full of it. It was probably like 30 Apple IIes.
Yeah.
And 2 of them had color screens on them.
You must have been in a rich neighborhood.
The rest of them were the green screen, but 2 of them had color screens on them.
I call poppycock.
And I remember, we'd go from our normal classroom and we'd, walk over to the computer classroom before class would start. And they made us line up outside the classroom before they allowed us in, right? Because all that stuff was expensive. It was not a rich school.
The room was locked.
Yeah. And so they made us line up, and then it was like, we'll let you in single file, in a controlled and orderly manner so that you're not, knocking tables over with computers and stuff. Mm-hmm. We would just beat the hell out of each other in line to be the first 2 people because we wanted the color monitors.
Yeah. Do you remember word processing it's sticking out that the color monitors, the aggravation early on from elementary school onward with the teacher would say, okay, import a clip art into your word processor, and then it would just absolutely destroy the format of all the letters and words around it. And so to me, I have lots of memories in that computer lab, but to me, every time the teacher would say, okay, now import this like little picture of a sleeping kitty or something like that, it was like I felt the same feeling of getting detention because I knew I was going to import it and then I was just going to be there. If we got done with the lesson as quickly as possible, then we could play Oregon Trail.
Right.
So I knew saying, okay, import this clip art, and then now you have to rearrange the columns and everything. I'm never going to play Oregon Trail today because the teacher wants me to import clip art into this word processor. And that's the thing. Back in the day, which was a Wednesday, I recall, how many, 80 columns, 40 columns. What was a color? It was, it wasn't measured in columns really, was it? But it was, the resolution wasn't that great.
No.
So there wasn't a whole lot of real estate to work with when you effed up a Word document by importing a clip art. So that's my memories of
lots of scrolling.
Lots of scrolling.
Nothing worse than horizontal scrolling.
Horizontal scrolling. Oh
that's
my gosh.
That's a fate worse than death.
Yeah. So I have as fate would have it, right in front of me right now, I have my beloved Atari 520 ST.
Ooh.
And it's in my system. It is one reason I got the CRT from the electronics recycling was I have a couple of cables for my Atari ST because one of the very few things that it still does reasonably well, even in 2019, is as it turns out, the very first version of Microsoft Word was written for the Atari ST. So I have Microsoft, this is before it ever came to Windows. This is 1987, I believe, is when the software was published. So it's really cool to type on a Microsoft Word on an Atari device. And it's workable. Word is word, basically. There's been some kind of, they've spit shined it a lot in the past. Oh geez, 30.
Yeah, I know, right?
32 years or something like that, but they pretty much had it right from version 1.0. So the keyboard on the Atari ST isn't the greatest in the world. It's kind of soft, but they have a really good sound to it. The layout is relatively modern. I tried to word process on the Commodore 64, and for the freaking life of me, and this is going to sound like such a noob plebeian thing, I can't. Where are the apostrophes? How can I conjugate anything? No, it forced exactly. Back in my day, the people at Commodore,
we only had uppercase letters and we liked it.
Mark Trammell was like, "We ain't conjugating on this thing. You're going to write cannot or should not. You are not conjugating. There are no possessives. Yeah. There are no possessives because Atari was a pretty they smoked a lot of doobies there at Atari. It was more like
it was a very interesting company.
There is no possessives or conjugations.
Hey, Steve Jobs worked there, right?
He did.
I mean, that's got to rub off.
Yeah. What did was it Arachnoid? Is that what Steve Jobs first?
Breakout, I thought.
Breakout.
I thought it was Breakout that he basically paid Woz to make for him.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know how to do it.
Yeah, we won't.
I think that was Breakout.
We won't get into all that. Well, Arachnoid and Breakout, they're kind of similar in concept, the ball and the paddle and breaking the bricks. It's still, credit where credit's due, Breakout's still a fun game.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so Atari was pretty loosey-goosey back in the day. Can we switch gears a little bit? Unless you have anything to add to that?
No, not really.
So, it's not Microsoft. Yeah, it is Microsoft. For some reason, I was thinking it was Intel. No, it's Microsoft. I don't know if you looked at any articles I sent you or you read up anything about this, but basically it's the concept that I want to discuss. I'm reading this from Ars Technica. Microsoft's Project Silica.
Yeah, I saw a little bit about that, yeah. So
basically it's a little... I would say 2-inch by 2-inch square. No, it's 7.5 centimeters by 7.5 centimeters by 2 millimeters thick. So it's a square that's 7.5 centimeters and 2 millimeters thick, and it stores right now. This is just kind of a prototype to demonstrate the technology. 75.6 gigabytes of data, and I guess a good way to think about that is you and I both share an affinity and a love affair with the Sony mini disc. Mm-hmm. So it's about the size of a mini disc and currently stores 75.6 gigabytes of data. At least that's what the Superman, they etched into it, the Superman movie. I guess because of the glass cube.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of Superman. But so I was trying to find what the theoretical limits here. I know that it's supposed to be astronomical and more, and just in the amount of data it can pack per square millimeter. But the main takeaway of it is really how robust and durable the medium it proves to be. But that brings me to this point. This is kind of what I want to talk about regarding this. Unless you have anything to interject before I get on to my main point. Okay. Remember when CDs, came out, and more importantly, CD recorders, they were promising like 100 years of storage on the CD. Bull crap.
Yeah,
that didn't turn out to be the case.
It wasn't going to be 100 years if you buying them dollar store CDRs, that's for sure.
No, and what you had to do, if you, what's going to be fun is if we live long enough, which I don't think we are. And I think that's kind of the beauty in that kind of marketing is, it'll last 100 years. Well, that's just outside of how long most people will live. So no one's going to claim that warranty. So, but to me, the storage on glass seems more robust. What did they claim? 10,000 years? They're saying here.
Yeah, it was in the
centuries.
thousands of years.
Yeah. So
category.
So the CDR said 100 years or whatever. Dude, no way. And the average person, let's say you burned a CD of what I'm blanking out, of like Smash Mouth or something like that. That CD's done for. If you kept that thing in your car, it's done after a year or two at best.
Oh, yeah.
It starts blistering and degrading. And so I'm just kind of wondering with this Microsoft, storage method in this glass, you can say decades or centuries, but if it's like any other kind of storage medium, the work is cut out for you, and no one's going to be around in 1,000 years to test it.
Well, so that brings up a really interesting topic. Mm-hmm. And that is, like for hundreds, thousands of years, we've had like books, people long time ago. And that's how we carried historical information from then until now. Since we're moving all digital, like what's going to carry that information forward? Like 1,000 years from now, kids sitting in class or learning however it is kids learn in 1,000 years, how are they going to know what life was like now if everything that we record is digital?
Right.
And so there's periodically those sorts of projects like that Microsoft one will crop up where someone gets this idea where, we need a high density storage medium that's incredibly robust, meant for permanent archival purposes. We can write all of our critical data to it now and bury it in some salt mine, and and in 1 billion years they can dig it up and still be able to read it, kind of a thing. And that's all well and good. And, it's probably a good idea that we should at least have some historical record like that, where we can take, maybe current events, take, news articles and that sort of stuff. More, I guess you could say, like official historical kind of records of what we would want to, the most important stuff of what we would want to carry forward about what life is like now, and save it to some sort of medium like that.
Yeah.
But where my head has been at, because, I'm dealing with archival data all the time, because I keep every scrap of media that I create for my YouTube channel. I never throw any of it out. There are some YouTubers who create a video, and as soon as they upload it to YouTube, they just delete everything and start fresh. I keep absolutely everything. So I'm getting into the terabytes range of content, like tens of terabytes. Yeah. I'm at the point where every year I have to buy a big hard drive just for that year's archive.
Right. And
so where my head has been going to is, we don't, for the bulk of our data, we don't necessarily need a permanent, really robust, thousands of years archival media. We just need to keep rolling the data forward. Right? Right now we're storing data. We used to store it generally on hard drives, and then it went to SSDs. When hard drives were small, like you were saying, we burned it to CDs and DVDs and that sort of stuff, because we went with whatever was the cheapest storage medium available, right? Best bang for buck. Yeah. And now people keep moving more and more out to storing it in the cloud. Well, the cloud is just a whole ton of hard drives, right? There's nothing magic about it. Except there have been some interesting things that some companies have been doing. For example, I remember reading an article a while ago. I don't know if they still do this, but Facebook backs up its data to Blu-rays. It's got this giant Blu-ray, you think the CD changer from back then, you could put the 100 discs in the CD changer. Yeah. Yeah. They've got an entire room that's just full of Blu-ray drives and changers and all this kind of stuff, I guess. But, mainline, or what they call nearline storage, is just going to keep advancing and getting more dense and cheaper and faster as time goes on. So what I think the future is going to be is file systems and data integrity and stuff like that. Because it's going to need to keep getting copied and copied and copied and copied over multiple generations. Yeah. In the analog era, if you think about something like cassettes, if you make a copy of a copy of a copy, the quality keeps going down. Right. With digital, it's supposed to be perfect every time you make a copy. You can have thousands of generations of a digital copy, and it should still be bit perfect to the original.
Right.
Well, that doesn't take into account like the laws of physics and the way that the hardware actually works, and then errors that may occur, file corruption due to bugs in file systems, that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so I think, kind of what's been going on with a lot of like open source file systems or quasi open source file systems like BetterFS and ZFS is we're starting to see much better like error checking and correction built in at the file system level. And I think that's going to be really the future going forward is how do we take this data that's already digital, that's already maybe been copied several times, and ensure that it doesn't get corrupted over the span of years or decades or centuries or more.
Yeah. That's true. I didn't even think about that. And the other thing, and we'll wrap up this segment. This is so long, Colin. I'm going to have to edit so much stuff for the broadcast.
Just all ums and uhs and yes. That's all you need out of me.
Yeah, you give me your blank ums. Yes, I agree. I disagree things. No, we'll save it for the next segment. I put a pin in that. I often say in the show, but we'll put a pin in that. We'll revisit it at the beginning of the next segment. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Colin is my guest from This Does Not Compute. If you lose us during the break, just make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to This Does Not Compute. It's a really cool channel. All sorts of retro gear and some modern stuff and how to install Windows 10 on a, what is it, Pentium? What did you try to do it on?
It was like a Pentium 2 era Celeron was the first machine. That was quite the odyssey.
Oh my goodness. All right, anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere.
When a man steps right up to the microphone, says at last, just as the time bell rings,
Good night, now it's time to go home.
then he makes it fast with one more thing.
We are the Sultans. We are the Sultans of Sultans of Swing.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and I am here still, because he's being so gracious with his time, Colin Worth of the YouTube channel This Does Not Compute, one of my favorite people to geek out with and talk to. Colin, how are you still doing this evening?
I'm doing great.
Cool. So, at the end of the last segment, we were talking about data encryption, and what got us started was Microsoft's they demonstrated their prototype technology of saving data into glass, into the actual, bowels and structure of glass itself. And it's supposed to be a storage medium that lasts for, they say, decades, centuries, thousands of years. And Colin was saying that that's all fine and dandy, but going forward, it's going to be about kind of data integrity, not just the storage medium, but ensuring data integrity over those thousands of years. And Colin, the pin I put in that conversation was a couple weeks ago, I was talking to a professor from University of Houston about quantum computing. And one of the things that he brought up was, he brought up many things that I hadn't even thought about and that many people haven't thought about. And there's going to be a lot of other things with quantum computing that even nobody today has thought about that are going to arise. But one of those things that he brought up was not just data integrity, but encryption and decryption. So that is part and parcel with data integrity. How good is the data integrity if somebody can just encrypt or decrypt whatever sort of protection you had on that data? So Colin, I kind of wanted to get your 2 cents, I guess, if you have any at all, about how quantum computing would affect that. And what I mean is, when you can do quantum computations to try to decode encryption, that means you can run through billions and trillions of possible combinations, basically, if we're thinking of encryption kind of like a simple lock or a password or something like that. Quantum computing means you can run through every single possibility for encryption or decryption in a nanosecond. So do you think that, do you see quantum computing as, in that regard, as something we should kind of take into consideration with data storage going forward? Do you have any sort of ideas on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely is going to play a part. And I'm not going to pretend to be any sort of quantum computing expert, but from what I can tell, it doesn't necessarily like completely make encryption useless or anything like that. It's just a faster way to use tools that already exist to try to defeat encryption, right? I mean, people already string multiple GPUs together to try to, crack hashes, that sort of stuff. Quantum computing, if you can get your hands on one of those, which is not really within the realm of most people, at least not yet. Yeah. I mean, that just goes through and it just basically can do the same calculations faster. Right. It's not like it's some sort of, oh yeah, here's your encrypted file, done, ding, right away kind of a deal. I mean, it's still going to need to crank on it, but it's just orders of magnitude faster. Yeah. Now, is that a problem? Well, if a nefarious person or someone otherwise unauthorized to get at encrypted data has a copy of the data and can use a tool like that, well, I mean, it's just a matter of time, right? Encryption is defeatable one way or another. Yeah. All encryption is defeatable one way or another, just full stop. So it comes down to other factors as well. And thankfully, I think the industry is starting to think about this more. I mean, every time you hear about breaches, it's never necessarily been that like the encryption on sensitive data has necessarily been cracked. That's not the first news you hear about. It's that unauthorized access to a system happened. You think back to like the credit bureau breaches. From a couple of years back. Right. It wasn't necessarily that, this database that's been floating around for a while, they finally managed to crack it, and now everyone's data's in the clear. It was those systems got compromised to begin with. So there needs to be a heavier focus on system security, following best practices, keeping up with software patches, identifying bugs in software faster. Companies that do bug bounty programs, I think, are on the right track to incentivize white hat, so-called white hat hackers, people who use their powers for good and not evil, to go find those bugs and report them, go through responsible disclosure, to get those bugs fixed before they can be used for nefarious means. That's a very important thing and becoming even more important. And then the other thing is the physical security aspect to it. And some companies are in better shape than others, but I think, again, the industry's kind of heading in the right direction so you would think of something like a personal device, an iPhone, for example. Yeah. Contains lots of really sensitive information in there, whether you realize it or not. It's kind of sad how much can be monetized off of someone's life these days, just based on their personal details. And it's almost always for advertising, right? I don't think very many people have like their social security number stored on their phone. Right. But there's plenty of detail in there that can be used to target advertising very specifically to someone. And that has value. Right. So you think about like, well, what if you lose your phone? Or what if, there was some otherwise unauthorized access to your phone? Right. It wasn't that long ago that phones were protected by simple 4-character passcodes, if even that the storage on phones was not encrypted, that you could try that passcode if you set one up an unlimited number of times. Yeah. That sort of stuff. Where we've been going towards and need to keep going towards is this kind of multi-layered defense of security, with the data on your device and getting the hardware to play along with that as well. Yeah. So like on a modern iPhone, you can set up the biometric stuff, whether it's Touch ID with a fingerprint or Face ID with the camera thing. the hardware that powers that is paired to the motherboard. So the firmware on the motherboard knows to only communicate with the specific, home button or camera that shipped with the device.
Yeah.
So you can't just like swap out the fingerprint reader with a modified one that always returns a positive result or something like that.
Yeah.
And the data on the device is encrypted by default. And then there's additional kind of like dead man switch type of protections in there where after so much time, it makes you put your passcode in and not just keep, trying fingerprints.
Right.
And even beyond that, if you fail too many times, you can enable a setting where it'll basically just brick the device. It'll wipe the entire contents of the phone.
You know what this all reminds me of is a foot chase scene in an action movie where the guy trying to get away is like throwing down crates and trash cans and all sorts of obstacles in the way of the bad guy chasing him. That kind of is what all of this, I'll just call it e-security or digital security, whatever have you. It's not just digital, it's hardware based too. As long as you can stay ahead of the bad guy trying to get your data also all these new techniques, I see it as throwing these obstacles behind you, because it's kind of like outrunning a bear. Also, you don't need to be the fastest runner. You just need to be faster than the guy next to you.
Yeah, you just can't be last. Yeah.
So you just can't be last. So there's never going to be a point with quantum computers, no matter where we go, even from quantum computing, anything has to do with data and encryption security. There's going to be nothing that we developed, that the good guys develop, that is going to be the end-all, be-all security for whatever data they're trying to secure, beyond actually physically destroying all the data that you want secured. But you can't really do that. You need to, even if you have the code, even if you destroy the data and you have the password in your brain, they'll try to get it out of your brain. So at the end of the day, it comes down to kind of personal will. It's all kind of interesting to think about.
It's a huge landscape, and it keeps getting wider and wider, and more exotic exploits, keep getting found out. But a lot of times the routine ones, every time, a company gets breached or whatever, it feels like 9 times out of 10, it's because someone in accounting or someone in sales or someone in some department got an email that was phishing, and they went ahead and opened the attachment, even though they were told, don't open the attachment. They did it anyway. Yeah. It's almost always a human failure. And the fact that that stuff is still prevalent just means we have a long ways to go. We have the technology, but we ultimately, as people, are kind of our own downfall in that regard.
Yeah. I won't get into it, but even if you think it's an obvious troll, it's an obvious fish, it's an obvious scam, and you just think there's no way anybody would ever fall for it, they do. So we'll move on to other stuff, but I'm going to kind of do a little segment break here. Colin, can you stick around for one more segment?
Yeah, you bet.
All right. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Colin Worth of This Does Not Compute on YouTube. This Does Not Compute is my guest, and we're having all sorts of geeky, fascinating discussion, and we will be right back with more of it after this commercial break, if you're listening to the radio. If you're listening to the podcast, we'll just be right back.
Down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens. There stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play a guitar just like a ring in the bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go. Johnny be good. He used to carry his guitar in a gunny sack, or sit beneath a tree by the railroad track. Oh, the engineers would see him sitting in the shade, strumming with the rhythm that the drivers made. The people passing by, they would stop stop and say, oh my, but a little metal boy can break. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go, Johnny, be good.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. Colin and I just had a cathartic mutual release in between. That sounds so gross. In between the break about a new product that's coming out that we are just stoked about. Colin, still doing good over there?
I don't know what you're doing. I'm just sitting here drinking a beer, man.
Oh, you got a beer?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, you don't?
My good. Okay, I went down to the kitchen and I told my wife I'm going to make a drink before I go up there. And drank with an A just means like, hey, I'm going to put a few shots of rum in this drink, and that makes it a drink.
Right.
But I didn't. I just got water. I got flavored water. I just didn't feel like putting rum in it. And you're sitting there drinking a beer, you bastard.
Well,
what kind of beer is it?
it's a local one. Well, semi-local one. It's not. It's like dad beer. It's
is it Pabst?
No, it's this stuff called Grain Belt.
Grain
It's
Belt
kind of-
or Grain Belt? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of local to Minnesota. I think it makes its way into like Wisconsin and Iowa, maybe a little bit.
Grain Belt. How many?
It's good.
Yeah, this isn't where I wanted to steer the conversation right off the bat, but
Beer Therapy Radio coming
Beer
at
Therapy.
you live.
I'll tell listeners right now, this is a good segue for a plug of my buddy James Simpson, who shares the radio station with me or has a show at a different time slot, a time slot that I want to be closer to because it's when the sun is shining and that's better for more listeners. But it's called What's on Tap Radio. And I think it airs 3 p.m. Sundays on KPRC 950. It's also a podcast, What's on Top Radio. And it's just all about beer and breweries and microbrew and everything surrounding that culture. So I always get jealous of him. But I'm happy that I work right down the hall because when he records his show and he has people in from Eighth Wonder Brewery, we have so many breweries in Texas, but especially in Houston and in Austin. Like, we are not starved for awesome beer around here. So when he records a show, he has all these guests in, and just basically I have as much beer as I can possibly drink. Sometimes I come into work and there's just a keg sitting there. I'm like, dude, are you even working? What's even going on in here? Just a keg. You're floating a keg.
Well,
What
he can
what an awesome
call
show.
it, business expense or whatever, right?
He's not paying for it. They're
No,
bringing
well,
that stuff in there, yeah.
there
So
you go.
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, man, James has got it figured out as far as a concept for a show. Maybe one day Geek Therapy will get to the point where people are like, hey, take this Mac Pro. I'm working on it though. I'm working on something. Well, I can't say anything. Hopefully it'll get there sooner than later. If you ever come to Houston, Colin, there is a shop in town. This is kind of a free plug for them. It's called EPO, Electronics Part Outlet. And I almost sent you or tweeted you a picture last Saturday. It is an absolute wonderland, Disneyland for not just, electrical components, but old radios, trains, CRTs, all sorts of Spectrum analog, like anything electronic at all. They just have rows and rows of floppy drives, rows and rows of zip disks. Like, it's one of those types of places that very passionately preserve old technology while embracing new technology. It's a really cool place. Do you have anything like that around where you're at? I'm sure you do.
I do. Probably not as big, although the place is packed and it does thankfully keep growing. There's one called Free Geek.
Yeah, Free Geek.
They're kind of a chain. Like, the first one started over in Portland, Oregon. And as we're on the topic of plugs, a little over a year ago, I actually did my first documentary on YouTube about Free Geek.
Which is really good, by the way.
Thank you. And so, they're just stuffed to the gills with, again, like you said, all kinds of electronic kind of stuff. The point is, if they can't refurbish it and either, find a home for it somewhere in the community, then it gets responsibly recycled.
Yeah.
But it's just this crazy mix of everything, and it's different every time you go. I mean, not only is like what they have different, but it seems like they're constantly reorganizing their facility to accommodate all the stuff they have. So it's like walking into a different place every time. It's just great, and we need more places like that.
Yes, I 100% agree. Okay, so this is really what I wanted to talk about this segment, and is what we're bonding over in the break. It is called, this is, attention all emulator fans and retro gaming fans. It's called the Analog Pocket. ANALOGUE Pocket. And it looks like it's going to be, it looks like a Game Boy Pocket, hence why it's named Analog Pocket, except that, let me go over some specs right here. I've gone over in a podcast before, but basically it's going to play every Game Boy game, every Game Boy Color game, like the actual cartridges, not loading ROMs or anything like that, which I'm sure someone will hack it to do so within the first 24 hours of release. But it plays all the physical cartridges, which that's what I'm really excited about. The screen, 3.5 inches, 615 PPI, it's 1600 by 1440, which is exactly, to my knowledge, exactly 10 times the scaling from the original Game Boy. Does 160 by 144, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah. I mean, in any event, because they went with such a high resolution, they're going to be able to get good quality out of pretty much anything.
Oh yeah. See, that's what I'm so stoked about, because it's not only Game Boy games, but with adapters you can be able to plug in like Atari Lynx games, Game Gear games, all sorts of other kind of pocket system games, and that's really exciting. And maybe you can shed a little more light on this. Do you know anything about FPGAs?
I know a little bit, and I've been told that I know nothing by certain members of the retro gaming community, which is fine. Which is fine, because we're all pedantic on the internet. Yeah. Basically the idea is, I'm trying to think of, like, I've explained it once before in a way that I really liked, and I'm trying to remember. To do emulation in software, a lot of times the approach is to write the software emulator to just get the game to play. Right? The goal is make the game play. And that's not to say that the people who write software emulators don't know anything about the original hardware. Painstaking amounts of research goes into how the original hardware works. Yeah. But because you're doing it all in software, you can cheat. Right. And so if there's a desired end result that you have, like if you know a game needs to do a certain thing at a certain time, instead of trying to like do things the hard way and write the software emulator to pretend to be the hardware and do it, you can just tell the software emulator, yeah, just do this. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And that is partially why software emulators have always been relatively inefficient on hardware. I remember it wasn't that long ago when you needed a fairly powerful computer in order to emulate some seemingly basic platforms. Yeah. Things have gotten a lot better, but I think the idea behind doing things in hardware, like with FPGAs, is you more or less attack it from the hardware side. You figure out, okay, here's exactly how this original chip worked. Here's all the gates and everything, what they did. And then you can program the FPGA, field programmable gate array. I was just going to program it to basically be the same thing. Right. So at the hardware level. Yeah. So the chip is only limited by basically how well you understand what the original thing did and how well you're able to program it. Yeah. So you get much better performance out of it that way, because you're not trying to, go from one hardware architecture to another like you are in software emulation. And again, I'm totally butchering this whole thing, and I'm sure there's thousands of people with pitchforks right now. Right. Storming the gates to tell me how wrong I am, but no, it's all right. The idea is FPGA is just way better. It's just way more better. So I'm stoked about this. When I'm trying to look. It's going to be fairly expensive as far as a couple $100 emulator. Something like that. Yeah. I mean, what did you say? I'd like to say it's a couple $100. Yeah. So it's shipping in 2020. I'm looking at the website here
for $199, so $200. And I'm already going to have a discussion with my wife, I think, because it's completely unnecessary. But at the same time, we have not seen a dedicated, not to my knowledge,
not to this quality.
Not to this quality.
This is the first legit
right.
handheld, like emulation / reproduction, whatever you want to call it, device that we've ever seen. Everything before this has been just those kind of really cheap knockoff kind of ones that run a very limited, like embedded Linux with the software emulators, the open source software emulators on top that just play ROM files. I mean, it's the same. Go look on like AliExpress or eBay or whatever. They're all over the place. They're cheap. The hardware isn't necessarily very good. Some of them do it better than others, but none of those really kind of cross like the product uncanny valley, if you know what I mean. Like the difference between like this is an obvious cheap knockoff by a no-name manufacturer versus this is something you would buy off the shelf at a major retail outlet.
Right.
The Analog Pocket's the first one that's like legit.
Yeah.
And honestly, for the money, it's going to be a hit. Because there are people who already spend that kind of money just trying to mod original consoles to do
exactly,
some of the same stuff, like the backlit screens and better sound and, nicer enclosures and all this kind of stuff. If you're not tied to the original hardware for nostalgia purposes, but you still want that great experience, if this thing lives up in terms of performance, it's going to be an absolute hit.
Yeah, I am so unbelievably stoked for it. And I would like to think that I could email them and say, hey, will you send me something, a review unit or something like that? But I don't think it's going to be easy to come by like that. They might, I don't know who they're even going to send it out to. But then again, this company has made other products in the past. They are kind of, I would call them more boutique. Like this isn't just some Chinese company that's just hammering out the generic, emulator crap. Like this is a devout group of people who are very dedicated to this project, and I have no reason to think that it's going to be anything less than amazing. Also, their track record is good. There's a lot of things that you see on Kickstarter and various other crowdfunding and things like that people get burned on, or that aren't the way you thought it would be, or they're the Atari VCS. That's a big shot across the bow to Atari right now. But
you mean their rotting corpse? I mean, that's not Atari anymore. I did a few podcasts and videos and stuff talking about the new quote unquote Atari VCS, which I'm in the camp now that you're going to have to prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's not going to be vaporware. Yeah, I'm there too. I mean, this product has been in the works. I did an episode about it when I was doing podcasts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, and I remember being cautiously optimistic about it. I'm gonna say right now, if I was into betting, I'd be betting a whole lot of money that product is never going to see the light of day.
You know what? And here's the actual insult to injury. Even if it does see the light of day, no one's gonna care anymore.
Right.
It's gonna have waited too long. They keep saying, "Oh, we're updating this or that," and they keep putting the goalposts back. You're gonna release it this date, this date, this date. They're upgrading to better AMD like octa-core or whatever doodly do. Well, your track record so far is that this thing's never going to come out, and if you wait 6 months, your hardware's obsolete compared to what else is out there. So I don't, even when it does come out, here's my prediction: A, it's not going to come out. B, if it does come out, no one's going to care, and the hardware is going to be behind as far as anything else that's out there. If they're trying to do any sort of cut into the console market or the, I don't know, retro gaming enthusiast market or game streaming market, it's just, I think it's going to be too late. I think Atari needs to stick with being licensing the name. Maybe they have software Roller Coaster Tycoon and things like that. You've got your bread and butter Atari. You don't need to start dangling a carrot of new hardware that very, very few people care about. Like it's going to go up against the PlayStation 5. PS5 is going to be out before the Atari VCS comes out.
Oh, yeah.
It's because it's just kind of dead in the water, and I'm getting all fired up about it because I was excited at the very beginning. I was like, oh, that looks really neat if it came out in, this Christmas. But all that to say, the company Analog has a very good track record of putting out products. So there's absolutely no historical indicator that this is going to be any sort of vaporware. And
it's coming out. Oh,
it's coming
guaranteed.
out.
I mean, there is no way that product is not going to launch, and there would have to be a lot of stuff that would go wrong for it to not be successl.
Right.
I mean, as long as they can deliver on the quality that they've, like you said, with the track record that they've already proven to have, then they're going to be just fine.
Yeah. I'm very, very excited for it. We haven't even scratched the surface of what this thing can do. It can pair with Bluetooth controllers, especially 8-bit DOE controllers, which 8-bit DOE, how do you pronounce it? 8-bit DOE or 8-bit DOE?
Oh, man. So, it doesn't matter because no matter how you pronounce it, you're wrong. I emailed them once because I've done some reviews. I emailed them once and I was told it's pronounced 8-bit DOE.
And really?
But then I pronounced it that way in a video.
Yeah.
And then I had a bunch of people say, no, it's 8-bit DOE. And I'm like, no, I even asked them and they said it's this. And they go, well, that person was wrong because someone else who worked for that company pronounced it the other way. I don't know and I don't care anymore. I'm just going to, I think if I do any more like reviews of their products, I'm going to just interchange between the two during the video and see if anyone notices.
It start pronouncing it like you start pronouncing other letters and vowels in there differently.
Yeah.
8-bite DOE.
Yeah, exactly.
The ocho.
All the different permutations. That way I'm covered.
Right. All right. We've talked for well over an hour here. I have to cut like over 20 minutes of this out for broadcast, but I'm super excited for the podcast. I'm always way more excited for the podcast version to come out because I'm not constrained to the time limits of radio, broadcast radio. I understand them. I appreciate it. I appreciate being on a station that broadcasts still in 2019. But yeah, the podcast is where it's at as far as unedited content. Colin, is there anything else you're excited about coming up? Plugs, anything?
Just
else
everything.
You can add to conversation?
Just everything.
Okay,
I mean,
awesome.
there's no lack of interesting stuff now. Like the pace of technology just keeps getting faster and faster. I wake up every morning thinking, okay, what cool stuff is going to happen today?
Right. And then sometimes it doesn't. But very rarely.
But that's when retro technology is great, right? Oh, today's a boring tech news day. Hey, all right, let's go explore some of this old stuff.
Here's a good thing to kind of wrap on. There's quite a few people out there, and I don't blame them at all for having this mentality. They can't relate to our enthusiasm for retro technology. But what you usually find is people who are so enthusiastic about retro technology very, very much appreciate cutting edge, and it goes kind of hand in hand. Is there anything you can add to that kind of sentiment?
Well, yeah, I think that's what's partially so interesting about retro tech. Part of it is that comparison and kind of the widening gulf between what it was like back then, in quotation marks, and what things are like now. It's just incredible how far we've come. And then there's also the other aspect of, even though it was relatively simplistic back in, say, the 80s and 90s, there was still a lot going on with technology back then. Yeah. And even though you and I have both been geeks our entire lives, as I'm sure a lot of your audience has been as well, there's still stuff that I'm learning from back then. Deeper parts of stories, different pieces of technology that maybe weren't very common to see or never saw the light of day. Ambitions that well-known companies had that ultimately got scrapped at the last minute and that could have been just like earth-shattering had it actually happened. There's tons of that stuff out there still to explore.
Right. And the other part of it, for me, and I believe for a lot of other people, is I have been on this electronics kick the past few weeks where I'm trying to bone up and refresh. I took a crash course in electronics, so schematics and circuit design and all sorts of stuff. I would like to build my own, for instance, like basic microphone preamp or basic circuits to do whatever. And part of my fascination and joy in retro technology is that I can see that. I can see those components still. I can go in there and see the resistors and capacitors and transistors and actually apply the electronics theory into the real world because I can see the components. I can see how it's laid out in retro tech. Versus if I open my Samsung smartphone, I will know the gist. I'll know that it's in there, basically. But things have gotten so small and so crammed and so compact and so non-user, repairable. Like Samsung and Apple don't want you opening up their phone. Obviously, that's an understatement to say they don't want you opening up their phone to explore what it's doing. You can't do that with most modern devices. But I can crack open this Atari ST and see the Motorola processor inside there and see the pin out and everything like that perfectly fine without using some sort of endoscope or microscope or anything like that. So it helps you appreciate what's in modern technology because you can open old technology and, like you said, it was almost like a divine intervention amount of just brain power that went into what you covered recently, like a Walkman, the intricacy in the mechanism.
And can you imagine they didn't have computers to help them?
No.
Like today they use computers to build computers. Like they're kind of cheating, right? Back then, like PCBs were laid out on paper.
Yeah. Slide rules and straight edges. And that's how we went to the moon.
Exactly.
Just sweat of the brow and a rusty slide rule and
just some really, really ridiculously smart people.
Just ridiculously smart people. And that's how we got here today with our phone / computer / best camera, like all in our pocket. All that retro tech paved the way for what we have today. And I very much appreciate all that. Colin, thank you so much for coming on Geek Therapy Radio. Plug all of your stuff. Go for it.
Yeah, This Does Not Compute on YouTube, at This Does Not Comp on Twitter and Instagram. I do all sorts of stuff on my channel. There's really no one particular theme other than just tech. Some of it's new, some of it's retro, audio, content creation, computers, retro video games, you name it. I've probably covered it at some point. I got a whole ton of really cool ideas coming up in the hopper, just working on trying to get them cranked out as fast as I can. Awesome.
So stay tuned to This Does Not Compute all over social media and YouTube for more of Colin's wonderful jaunts down the technological trail, both future and past technology. Colin, as always, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for coming on Geek Therapy Radio again. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, it's always a good time.
His mother told him someday you will be a man, and you will be the leader of a solo band. Many people coming from miles around to hear you play your music when the sun goes down. Maybe someday your name will